Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, David Strege, and here in the room with me, I have hello, everybody, the Inside Movies Galore crew. We have Koda Kabuki Jake.
Hello.
Septum Sin.
Yo.
Mo.
Howdy.
Corey. No, I mean Dave.
Who's Corey?
I have no idea. He was somebody that was on the show recently.
Oh yeah, Cody. He's my intern. I had him cover for me during the last episode.
Unfortunate kid with a real fucked up home life. I'll tell you that.
Clearly, yeah.
I'm gonna take Cody under my wing, though. I'm gonna teach him some things.
Well, I'm trying to straighten that boy out. I'm trying to straighten that boy out.
Yeah, he needs a job. Anyway.
Well, I mean, he is working for me, so I might have him come on some of my later videos. Just depends on if people want to see him.
All right.
Alrighty. So in here with me, I have tonight's host for today, and I've got my dice all ready for this movie.
Woohoo!
So, why don't you tell me a little bit about what movie we're about to see? All right.
So, in deference to this being Meet the Cast Month, even though it's technically 2 months, and we call it Meet the Cast Month, I, Kabuki Jake, am putting forth a movie that for many years, well, at least for several years, was my favorite film. And it still is a favorite. It is the Richard Donner retelling of the 1950s, 60s, I don't remember the exact date, but the old Maverick TV serial. This is the Richard Donner film from 1994, Maverick. IMDb gives a pretty bare bones synopsis. Brett Maverick, needing money for a poker tournament, faces various comic mishaps and challenges, including a charming woman thief. The film is written by William Goldman of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men, Misery, and The Princess Bride fame. And it is one of his best screenplays, I have to say. It also stars Mel Gibson in the title role of Brett Maverick, the original Brett Maverick, James Garner, in the role of Marshall Zane Cooper, and Jodie Foster in the role of the, quote, charming woman thief, Annabelle Bransford. So I'm going to start with this. I'll start with you, Dave. What's your first impressions or overall impressions of this one?
Well, first of all, my name's Dave. From the South. Let me tell you something about this film. I kind of sort of watched it maybe a little bit yesterday and the rest of it today. And just decided to speed it along. And well, I kind of liked it. So it kind of had a little bit of a Western style. It was kind of up my alley. And started out with a poker game, so it kind of like seeing the dude from what was it, Temple of Doom?
Oh, you're talking about Alfred Molina? Yes, he was in Raiders. He was in Raiders.
Seen him in that role, so
yes, he was in Raiders.
But
I'd have let you fall down for free.
It was the first time seeing the film from down under, so. It was definitely entertaining.
Oh, good times. How about you, Mo?
Oh, shit, man. Yeah, like, I don't know if this was ever my favorite movie, but it was definitely for, like, a period when it was newer. A repeat watch for me and my little brother. We just watch this all the time. Absolutely still love it to this day. Absolutely think it's probably one of, like, in terms of, like, a genuine Western that's also a fucking comedy, I think Maverick has got to be like top tier. I mean, I've seen a couple other ones.
Yeah.
But this, for my money, is like the highest quality of them. at least of what I've seen.
Yeah. It's I think everyone talks about Blazing Saddles, but I think this one ranks up.
Yeah, because it just feels more legitimately like a Western that just is dealing with sly, greasy characters that would be kind of funny to be around, you know?
Right.
I like the idea that it's like also a Western with kind of most of the mortal violence taken out of it because they're just slime bags that try to escape all the time and stuff in a way.
And everyone
just
owe him.
Or he, he owes them for something. It's just it. I think the impression I took out of it this viewing was that it so deserved a couple sequels that we also deserved, I think, as fans, that it didn't get because he was busy, obviously, probably with other shit that he was doing at the time.
Like a little movie, probably prepping a little movie called Braveheart.
Some crap like that. I mean, I'd have taken 2 Maverick sequels over a couple of the movies that he did back then.
Well, not only that, if we're talking Mel Gibson's contributions with Richard Donner or collaborations with Richard Donner, they're best known probably for their Lethal Weapon series. And this
Danny Glover was in here.
This came out 2 years after Lethal Weapon 3.
So knew it.
Lethal Weapon 4 definitely was one of the things that kind of maybe got in the way a little bit.
Because God, it begs for it. Like if I could go back in time and change like things about movie history, getting Maverick at least one sequel would have been the thing that I would have changed.
It almost looks though like Richard Donner must have kind of more or less retired. This is one of his last films. He followed it up with Assassins, Conspiracy Theory, Lethal Weapon 4, Timeline, 16 Blocks, and Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut.
All right.
And then there's a Sting video that he did, which is the same year. And that's it. IMDb lists nothing else as a director.
No,
so Richard, the Superman 2, his version is a lot better.
But that was in 2006. That was 14 years ago. He's still alive, and he hasn't directed anything in 14 years. So it's like,
well, and even that, like he shot all that stuff back in 1978, and they just reassembled it all in 2006.
Still crusty and gruff as hell in interviews too. I love it. I love Dick Donner in interviews. The guy.
I know that he did when he did the Goonies. I know that he couldn't stand the kids.
Yeah, it's like he's such one of my favorite directors just because of his personality. Like, we're just doing our thing.
Well, but also, from what I understand, those kids were all a bunch of little shits. So,
as kids are at that age,
especially Hollywood kids.
That would have been my overall, because I don't know that I ever really thought too much on it in the past. I just kind of watched Maverick, but this time I really came away wishing that we had gotten a sequel or two.
I tell you what, though, I mentioned this in our pickups yesterday, which I guess airs tonight, if I'm remembering correctly.
Tomorrow.
Okay, tomorrow. One of my presentations this week was Lethal Weapon 2. I should have thought about that I had an unwatched copy of Lethal Weapon 2. I should have watched the first 2 Lethal Weapons as part of my prep for this, because there are a lot of Lethal Weapon references. But I didn't really think about it. And we'll get into those as we go along. But anyway, Dane, what's your impressions on this one?
Well, this was a first-time watch for me. The first time I ever even heard of the film was actually watching the behind the scenes of The Passion of the Christ, where they talked to Jim Caviezel, and I guess that he must have talked to Mel Gibson about possibly being in the film. This was like obviously a long time ago, and he said Mavericks plural, so I kind of wondered, like, was that the same movie or what? But I know that the desire to adapt that section of the Gospels was in Mel Gibson's mind for like a long time, and you'll notice this was an icon production, and that was the old Icon logo, which I didn't even know there was an Icon logo that wasn't the classic one that we know, like the eye. But
I didn't even
anyway.
notice that. No.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
I
if
know
you're a fan, if you're a fan of Mel Gibson as a director, as I am,
Yeah.
you know, you notice that. But like the so in other words, I had heard about it kind of word of mouth, so to speak, and then you know, saw it just now, and I'd never seen the show. I'm sorry to say. There
You
are a
should
lot
be.
of I know. Well, there are a lot of old Western shows. I mean,
Yeah.
like that's what the obviously Once Upon a Time in Hollywood they reference.
Right.
Well, that with the show within the movie Bounty Law, it's like there are
Yeah.
a lot of old Western TV shows from that time period that well people my age have never heard of necessarily, and
Oh
that's
yeah, dude. I mean,
Right.
westerns were like our samurai fucking yakuza period. It was a
Yeah.
boom, you know.
exactly.
And,
Well,
al-
but go ahead.
and also they haven't exactly made it easy. Like Brandon's pointed out that this movie is out of print, but like most of the series is out of print. You can get seasons 1 and 2 pretty easily, and I bought them at Walmart really cheap. But seasons 4 and 5, forget about it. You can get them. You can pay an arm and a leg. You can get them. I think you can order them directly from Warner's because Warner's has that archive program, but they're not wide release. So
What
they
about
really
the
need
movie
to do it.
though?
The movie is out of print.
Yeah.
Like,
They
I
need-
mean, is it hard to get a copy of it though?
I don't know how hard it is.
It really easily.
I
I've
I
had
kind
mine
of feel
for
like I was
$1.
finding Maverick like every fucking time that I went to the thrift store for a while.
I've had it for years, and yes, for a while it was easy to get, but I don't know that it's ever had a proper release since that initial flipper.
I don't know because like
Yeah.
I ordered it from Amazon, like just normal Amazon Prime. I got it really easily and quickly. So I don't know. Maybe they put it back into print. I don't know. But anyway,
Is it that flip cover though?
Yeah, it's probably the same variety. Like I said, what they really need to do, they need to do a complete collection, the whole TV series and the movie, and just I'd buy it.
Shout Factory needs to release it.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah,
fucking
like
give us a sequel too. Fuck it.
like a shout
Well,
select
and
or something.
actually, Mo, you've got a good point there because the original series they started with James Garner as Brett Maverick. 8 episodes in, they realized, wait a minute, we can't do an episode a week and still make our air date because so they brought in Jack Kelly to play Bart Maverick, who does get a shout out in the movie, and Bart Maverick alternated with Brett Maverick. And they did that for 2 seasons. And then James Garner left in a contract dispute. So they brought in Roger Moore as their cousin, Bo Maverick.
Oh, shit.
And that's like, and then
And that's why there's that Bart joke in the movie too. Eh?
Yes.
Yes.
So they tried really hard to keep the show in the air. Let's put it that way. But and it ended up going for 5 seasons. It of course it also had Adam West in a handful of episodes, Ephraim Zabalis Jr. in a handful of episodes.
God damn, I need to see these so bad.
I have been watching season 1. I am almost
You said that, yeah, and I was tempted, dude. If I wasn't deep in so many marathons right now, I'd be on that with you.
But it's really interesting because they really borrowed a lot, and I'll talk about that as we go on. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut into you, Dan. Did you have anything more on your
well, mostly just that I had to kind of hear about it secondhand like that, and I watched it right before we started, and it was, and I've seen all the Lethal Weapons, I've seen the Goonies, I've seen Richard Donner's Superman and Superman 2. I've seen plenty of his movies, and this definitely had that classic blend of action and good humor. It was very Lethal Weapon crossed with something like The Princess Bride in terms of tone and style, which makes sense considering who made it. But
not to mention he also did Scrooged, which was really good. Yeah.
Well, and I think it had a good sense of humor about itself. It William Goldman, he could
He was
write
brilliant.
he was a brilliant writer, but like
He's brilliant.
he could write humor in a way that I think people haven't really been able to anymore. Like he was able to make it really clever and snappy without it being too cutesy or too
It's very natural.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could believe that in this world that people would talk like that, and it's not too much like spoof. Nothing like that. Now there was definitely some fourth wall breaking in here, but like a little bit, and it wasn't too heavy handed. But it was my only real criticism on the script level, which again kind of a criticism, but not really. It's very telling of where TV adaptation movies were in the 90s, because there were a lot of TV adaptation movies, and like another one that I guess was technically New Line, but it was Warner Brothers. They put out was Lost in Space, and they had a similar criticism of that script, which was that in both scripts here, they do feel very episodic, and obviously there's a reason for that, because they were adapted from episodic TV shows.
It was a regular feature in the Maverick series that one of the Maverick brothers, either Bart or Brett, would narrate the introduction to the episode, and every now and then they give an update through narration, which they definitely did in this movie. And I thought that was very much a callback to the series.
It sounds like they did their homework, which obviously having not seen it, you'd be a better judge of that than me. But I would say just my only thing I would say is there's a reason why the IMDb description is rather vague and not all that descriptive. It's because the plot is very episodic, and it's very it's like this happens and then this happens and then this happens, and at a certain point, like I was a little bit like, this is fun, this is amusing, but remind me where's this going again? I was like, oh yeah, the big poker game. Okay.
The big game. Do you have enough fun?
It just there were definitely it definitely meanders a lot, and it meanders to funny, very clever places. Don't get me wrong. I have also subsequently, I have seen other film adaptations of TV shows, even from the 60s. Like a good example is actually the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek. That is people don't really talk about it in this way, but like the script for that movie is remarkably tight, and it is
it's a good movie. It's a good movie. I love the Abrams Star Trek movies.
I do too, but like that first script in particular, it was so well paced, it was so tight, it was so even if they hadn't had sequels, like it was so just well contained into one movie, and just very well structured, didn't feel too long or too short, so in other words, like TV show movie adaptations, like they came along later, and they were able to be they were able to work better as just movie scripts. And then but in the 90s, when they did a lot of those adaptations, the plots tended to be very episodic, and like even there were a ton of them. Like there was the Addams Family, the first one. That's very episodic. And then
this came out the year after Addams Family Values.
That's right. Well, but like there was that. There was the Brady Bunch movies. There was
Flintstones.
Well, actually,
I only saw bits of Flintstones. I didn't.
Well, actually, from I haven't seen it, but I've seen like reviews of it, and the plot does seem very episodic. But like, the Mission Impossible actually had a properly cinematic plot. And it, so there were some exceptions, but in other words, like at that time, their plots tended to be episodic, which reflected the shows, but they weren't necessarily cinematic, if you get what I mean.
And then, you know, I would
say though, the overall plot for Addams Family was not as episodic as you're saying. Like, I feel like it was a pretty solid. It was mostly centered on Fester's return.
Yeah,
and they did a pretty good job. Yeah,
and for this, even though the movie seems to kind of, you know, wind up in three sort of parts,
but it definitely they build the All Rivers tournament.
Yeah, they build to an overall conclusion, and then that does leave you open for more.
Well, I should clarify. I should clarify
when I say it does have an episodic feel, because you do start with well, you don't really start, but you enter early into a scene where there's a tournament where he meets various characters. You do have the stagecoach ride. You do have the part with the wagon train that was attacked. You do have the part with Joseph and the Indians. You do have, and then you have the All Rivers tournament itself. So there definitely are some episodes to be had. And a lot of them are specific callbacks to the show. So I get that argument fully. It does have a good overarching feel to it, but it definitely has some episodes as you go. You can think of it as a really well-structured anthology film if you wanted to.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, kind of.
It could have maybe benefited from a bit of the Lady Snowblood treatment, where that movie's broken up into like 4 chapters or something like that.
Well, and that's what I meant by episodic, meaning not that it didn't build to something. I didn't want to make that argument. It was more that each of the segments, like, they did have their own beginning, middle, and end, and they
for sure.
And there's the hint of the larger thing in the background, which is the poker game. But TV shows do that all the time, where, you know, there's this big thing that the finale builds up to, or at least that's how it used to work in the pre-streaming days. Nowadays, the structural rules are just kind of up in the air.
This is a lot like the Arrowverse seasons, because each season you've got a couple of characters who are the through line for the whole season.
Yeah,
and then you have little through lines. This one you've got in that opening sequence, that opening tournament introduces Annabelle. You've already been introduced to Maverick and Angel in that first scene, so the 3 of them start the ball rolling. And then when they get on the stage and when they get on the ferry, you meet Coop, and the 4 of them. Annabelle, Maverick, Coop, and Angel are a through line throughout the rest of the film. But if you go through each scene, you'll see individual characters. You got the bank guy who's only in that one scene. You got Joseph, who's basically in a couple of scenes. You've got the Commodore, who doesn't show up until the big All Rivers tournament. You know, so you definitely have some big characters who show up for certain segments of the film. So yeah, you can definitely make the argument that there are episodes within the
right. And like I said,
not necessarily bad. It's just more. It's just more of an observation of where the script structures for TV show adaptations, where they were versus where they have become. Of course, nowadays we see the opposite, where movies become TV shows.
Well, and like I was saying, dude, I mean, there is a middle ground to that. Like Lady Snowblood, and as far as I know, this is the first time they did it with like a studio film or something like that. So now, or at least they claim, but you know, they break it up into definite chapters. Like after each chapter, there's fully a part that's like Chapter 2, long convoluted Japanese title. You know, and it helps very much to make the movie feel like you watched
translation.
Pretty much.
So we haven't had Brandon give his intro, and I actually know his intro to this film, but we'll go ahead.
I had heard about it earlier on, but I never had an interest in it. Unlike several people here, I'll admit my introduction to Westerns, I had a kind of love-hate relationship with Westerns. I really loved the Clint Eastwood gritty style westerns. Those were like my favorite, regardless.
A little spaghetti.
But at the same time, I was bored to tears when I would sit there and watch things like Maverick, the TV show, the Gunsmoke, or
oh god,
or gosh, Bonanza. I
Didn't
have
Eastwood get his start on Gunsmoke?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
But they're very different character type. And again, it's like to me, I always considered westerns boring. And if it wasn't a Clint Eastwood western, I had no interest in it. I've expanded. We talked about this on Monday a little bit about changing perspectives, and I'm a little bit more open. Of course, Jacob and I had this little thing where we would go back and forth and show each other movies. And he brought up Maverick as one of his because he's like, "You haven't seen Maverick before?" I was like, "Nope, don't care." And he's like, "Well, that's what I'm bringing up.
This will not stand."
And
this aggression will not stand, man.
And the rules were pretty simple. It was basically, it didn't matter what the movie was. We ended up making sure we watched it. That's how we saw movies that became instant classics to each other, but also movies that we both ended up hating, which are usually first-time movies. Artifacts. What was it? Gosh, there was one that you showed, but it wasn't as bad as that. But it was.
There was one I showed you and Brittany called Marebeto that I know everyone ended up hating.
That was boring. But that was the thing is, I thought it was entertaining. It wasn't one that I had any major love for, but I thought that it was an entertaining movie. It had a good comedic plot, and it did open me up to watching some other more comedic style westerns, like say Quigley Down Under, for instance, with Tom Selleck.
Classic.
And of course the late what's his name? Snape.
Tombstone.
No, what was the guy who played the guy who played Snape? I can't think of.
I always forget his goddamn name anymore. And
Kurt Russell?
No,
yeah,
Snape.
Exactly.
Oh, I thought you said Snape in Harry Potter.
Like in Harry
Oh,
Potter.
that's Alan Rickman.
Alan Rickman.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
I used to always
Kurt
know
Russell's
that,
still
dude.
around.
And he was an excellent villain in that movie, Quigley Down.
Yeah.
I used to always know Alan Rickman, and then my family bombarded me with goddamn Harry Potter, and now all I can think is Snape every time. I'm watching Die Hard. And I'm like, check out Snape right there. And immediately, as soon as I said it, I was like, what the fuck? You know?
Die Hard with
Snape.
Alan Rickman is the man, though.
He is.
Today I'm back in the library, by the way, and today I checked in a copy of Galaxy Quest, and I was like, "Oh man,
oh my god!"
Well, and let's not forget Dogma, where he played the Metatron.
Yes.
He was really funny in
Or he played the voice of the robot.
Galaxy Quest, though.
Galaxy.
Yeah.
Galaxy Quest is like right there with Die Hard. Like that's top tier.
I was impressed with the fact that, like, out of all of Kevin Smith's movies, I think Dogma probably had the best overall cast in terms of just overall caliber of actors, and also just people that you wouldn't necessarily expect in a Kevin Smith movie, like Alan Rickman, who really got it, and that just showed what a talent he was and how much he's missed.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
he might have been fun in this.
Well, and he would have been good in this, and actually, that's something that my dear intern Cody, something that he brought up in the last video, was that Mel Gibson, again, he kind of, because of his own personal problems and stuff, he kind of gets associated with a lot of negativity unfairly today, but because he's done a lot to redeem himself in my eyes anyway. But he always, I think, had a great knack for not only action and drama, but also comedy, and oftentimes merging those things together, because he could. What made him unique as a actor and a person is that he could play characters who are a little crazy, a little kooky, a little like off base. You know, he could play those characters really well, but he could blend it with a lot of charm, with a lot of you know, a lot of panache, a lot of, you know, like you wanted to watch him even though he was kind of off, you know, like you wanted to watch him do his thing. And you know, like that's in his more like comedic sides. And then I think that same instinct served him incredibly well when it came to his directorial work, which tended to be period epics. And, you know, and I mean that because he, out of any director I can think of, he understood the mentality of people in those time periods because they, you know, were facing death at every conceivable turn. And when you are facing death at every conceivable turn, you're kind of, you know, you're more off base than you would be if you thought of death as almost optional, as we do today in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so I think he really, because he's kind of off base and perhaps a little crazy relative to most people today, I think he understands the mentality of people in those older times in his like serious epic films, and also understands how to really make a action film more entertaining, how to make even a romantic comedy like What Women Want, you know, how to make that really work, because he could play the, you know, chauvinistic business guy who then, you know, gets thrown off his game, and he is again a little crazy. You know, it's like he could do all that really, really well. And I think people kind of forget those sides of him. And you know, I would love
back
to.
in these days, though, he's probably still cutting his like this is early '90s Mel, right? Like he's just lost the mullet. He's like, I can do more than Mad Max and goddamn Lethal Weapon.
More than a mullet.
He's out there showing his ass and Bird on a Wire. I don't know.
Well, and let's not discount his really good accent work, because which he doesn't really have to do it here, but like I'm thinking, well, in Mad Max, because he spent so much time growing up in Australia, you know, he's sort of like, I guess I've heard him described as like Australian American or whatever. Like I think he's got a decent amount of, you know, foot in both camps. Like in other words, like when he did the Australian for Mad Max, it did not feel like an American doing a really bad Australian accent. It felt very authentic because, well, guess what? He spent a lot of time there. And then even with the Cockney that he did in The Beaver, with the Beaver's voice, like that sounded really good. And it's like, you know, this is someone who you could believe that in a movie like this, where he has to be really quick on his feet and he has to adopt a persona or try to throw people off to gain the advantage or whatever, you could believe that this kind of person could do that because, well, Mel Gibson shows just what a wide range he has.
In the director's commentary for The Beaver, Jodie Foster mentions that some people have asked her, is that Ray Winstone playing the Beaver? It's like, no, it's Mel Gibson. It's him all the way. But I mean, Ray Winstone does the Cockney brogue like nobody does. And it's like the idea that Gibson could nail that to the point where people think it's Winstone. I find that amusing.
That is sweet.
I mean,
Brandon, hold up, bro. Brandon, you were trying to get something out a couple of times there.
Well, thanks. I was trying to say it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff that came from Brisco County Jr., which was another Western comedy. Did that come after? I think that came after, didn't it?
Brisco County aired in 93 and 94. So Brisco County was flipping awesome. It was a great show.
But it had some flavor of that as well, I thought.
Yes, and actually that is a good segue into my talk on this. I've known Maverick for years. This was a favorite of mine. But I actually did watch Brisco County when it aired. And that might have been part of the reason why I was primed for Maverick. I was ready for it because the character of Dixie Cousins is very similar in a lot of ways to the character of Annabelle Bransford. There's a lot of similarities there. And I actually went to a signing. Bruce Campbell was touring as Brisco County Jr. I went to a local mall event, and I was so close I could taste it, and
you could taste the Bruce.
We got cut off. We couldn't meet the Bruce. I was so upset. Oh man, you have no idea. And now I'm even more so. Now that I know more about who Bruce Campbell is and everything. Oh man,
as far as I know, bro, Bruce Campbell is right over here in Oregon, and it's fairly easy to get him to sign stuff if you live locally. So
Bruce Campbell would be amazing in a Western.
He was.
Yeah, you never saw
Brisco County?
No, I never heard
it was great. It was
you get to discover that now? Holy shit, you're lucky.
Yeah.
It's a steampunk Western where he plays a U.S. Marshal, or rather the son of a U.S. Marshal who was murdered, and he's out basically trying to pick up the pieces. And it's got Billy Drago as his nemesis, John Bly. You've got Kelly Rutherford as this character, Dixie Cousins, who has a lot of similarities with Annabelle Bransford. And I had actually been watching Maverick for years. Like I said, for many years, it was a favorite of mine. I don't remember when I mentioned it as my favorite film. For a while there, American Beauty was my favorite.
Maverick was a good sleepover film, man.
Maverick was the one that preceded American Beauty.
It's like that movie you chuck it in a marathon when your friends are over with like Mark for Death with Steven Seagal and some other bullshit Mighty Ducks or something. You're gonna have a good night. You know.
I mean, it's a William Goldman freaking film. We mentioned in our discussion last year, we did a discussion on The Princess Bride, and I talked about how much I freaking love William Goldman films. And The Princess Bride is part of the reason why. And William Goldman, the late William Goldman, the brilliant late William Goldman, said that The Princess Bride and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were the only things he was proud of in his life. Like Maverick, Misery, and All the President's Men. You should put those on the list too. I mean, they were all great. Yeah,
just leaving us out there like that.
But at any rate, this guy
overlooked Maverick. I always overlooked Maverick myself. I know that I think my fiance told me about it. We watched it once on TV, and I think it's just I didn't remember watching it until after I'd watched this. So I guess this wasn't my first time watching this film, but it wasn't one that I gravitated towards because I just couldn't see Mel Gibson in the Western.
And I thought you were a Western fan, man.
I am a Western fan. A true Western fan.
It is a departure for him, I guess. But we also watched him in Mad Max, which isn't that far off from a Western. I mean,
I like that Mel Gibson in this. Like, I like that he is a capable gunslinger and everything, but he
can't hit shit, especially when he's aiming at people. You know,
but also he doesn't do a lot of the classical Western hero things. Like, he doesn't wear a cowboy hat. He kind of dresses like what would have been called in the old days a dandy. You know, meaning in other words, very well dressed, very not gay, but just like.
In the original Maverick series, I started watching an episode tonight, and I didn't have time to finish it. But the character that Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. plays, who of course would eventually become the guy who voiced Alfred Pennyworth in the Batman animated series, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. plays a character named Dandy Jim Buckley. And he's a flim-flam man who is very much
there you go.
and he's a foil for Brett Maverick. They're like the two sides of the coin. They're both con men, but Dandy Jim Buckley doesn't have moral scruples, and Brett Maverick is very scrupulous.
Right. What you got on your hands here is the slick card player dude that you've seen in tons of westerns. Really, is just like a side character, but he's made the central hero of the story, I guess.
And again, in the original series, the Maverick brothers were the beacons of moral decency. In this version, Brett's more of a flim-flam man, but he still stands up for what's right. And of course, James Garner reprising his role essentially as Zane Cooper, but he's kind of reprising his role as the original Brett Maverick, and he is sort of the more even when he's exposed as the guy who's going to rip off Maverick, he still manages to come out on top at the end because he exposed the real con artist. You know what I mean? But like, I love the movie, but I want to mention more on Brandon's exposure to this because I mentioned Dixie Cousins and her similarities to Annabelle Bransford. Brandon decided at the time we had more time. This was before he was with his wife. We had more time. He was showing me shows, not just movies, shows.
Yep.
And he showed me Cowboy Bebop. The classic Shinichiro Watanabe sci-fi western space opera. Just
I see where you're going with this, I think.
Yes. And we decided to do a twofer. We watched the Cowboy Bebop movie, Knocking on Heaven's Door, and Maverick as a twofer.
That is so badass.
And not just Annabelle Bransford and Dixie Cousins, but Faye Valentine.
Oh,
that archetype.
They are that lady for sure.
It fits that archetype perfectly.
Dude, mind blown.
I
never even
actually
thought about it.
Yes, and I actually created a character for the One Piece game that we played named Connie Bransford, who was very much based on those three characters. And she was so big of an impact on me that I still intend her. When I eventually become a published writer, Connie Bransford and her daughter, Annabelle Valentine, will be characters in my series. They were very much based on that archetype. And I love that pairing. If you've never done that pairing, you should
do it now. It sounds amazing.
And if you've never watched Cowboy Bebop, do it now. It sounds
that's essential.
And
actually, you know what's funny?
Watching the show, Annabelle is loosely based on a character from the series. There's a character from the original series named Samantha Crawford. She has 4 appearances. I've seen 2 of them so far. One with Brett and one with Bart. And she is a con artist who manages her first appearance is an episode called According to Hoyle, where she invokes Hoyle to screw Brett out of tons of money. And it's interesting.
Dude, even at the end of the movie, not to skip too far ahead, but I guess we're kind of jumping around. They do kind of end it on that, like it'll be fun to get the money back from her, kind of a note, where it's like you can tell that's and just based on their relationship in the film.
And what you were saying earlier about how there should have been a sequel, there could have been a sequel where they brought in
easily
character. Yes,
easily. We could sit here and spitball sequels for days for shit like this. That's the beauty of it, because it is like based on sort of a serialized thing.
Exactly.
It's easy to take those characters and envision them and getting into different hijinks. You know what I mean?
And actually, given that association with Ray Winstone, How about Ray Winstone playing a Maverick cousin in some future sequel? I mean,
There you go.
that could be fun, you know?
Dude, they could have done like a whole one that was about them on a train during a train robbery. Like if they wanted to gimmick it up like they did. They could have done like the Maverick version of Under Siege and it would have fucking kicked ass.
You mean Under Siege Dark Territory? I always loved that movie. I thought it was underrated. That was a quote that I quoted so many times. It was like Eric Bogosian is like, "Did you see the body?" No.
As much as I love seeing Tommy Lee get a fucking knife rammed into the top of his skull.
What's up?
As much as I love seeing Tommy Lee get a knife rammed into the top of his skull and then fucking pushed into a computer monitor or whatever the fuck.
Yes.
Under Siege 2 had the better knife fight.
Yeah,
I think.
But I mean, again, it had that one quote, like "Assumption is the mother of all."
Yeah,
and I'm like, that was my introduction to that quote, and I'm like, oh, I love that. Oh,
he fights the dude in the gimp suit from People Under the Stairs. Fucking sign me up.
So anyway, so I guess that's enough of the intro. We're 45 minutes in, and we just finished the intro.
Well, did you guys notice how, speaking of anime and this movie, you guys notice that? Well, this would have been before this show would have come at least to the United States, and I'm pretty sure in Japan. But like, if you noticed, Maverick had to trust in the heart of the cards, like at Yu-Gi-Oh, to get the card he wanted.
Yeah,
I was like,
I have to admit, I'm still a bit of a noob when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh.
Someone needs to fucking like meme that up, dude, where they have him throw out the Egyptian god cards or whatever after
he does have that thing of now.
Well, I mean that was
I believed that if I fought hard enough, I could cut to any card I wanted. Basically,
no, I can see that.
Of course, it didn't always work.
Well, but that's the thing.
I like how he follows that up with actually it never worked. Like even in his own little narration of his life, he's like
now apparently in the original cut of the film, there was going to be a scene with him meeting with a hermit where he actually made it more or less work.
That would have been fucking amazing, like some card cutters kung fu adventure.
I kind of like it better the way they did it though. Where he finally made it work when it really counted.
It reminds me of a Wes Anderson film, the way that they scripted that. Any of them, because you think about it, you could see that from most of the films, but I could especially see something like, like a Fantastic Mr. Fox. Couldn't you see them playing a poker game together, and he's just like saying, and of course I just thought to myself, I could probably guess that card, and just the way that he could do it, just the way that they presented it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what would happen on Yu-Gi-Oh is that, and they like abused the hell out of that storytelling device. But what would happen is the characters would be in a duel, like it was basically it was like Pokemon, like the Pokemon card game, basically, but with it's called Duel Monsters in the show, but of course. The kids like me and the people my age, we would get the Yu-Gi-Oh cards and play like that. Anyway, so every time they would do a duel and our heroes, they were getting close to not being able to win or whatever, they would always say, I have to trust in the heart of the cards. And as soon as they said that, then of course they'd get
it all the time in school. It'd be like heart of the cards, because the guy in the first episode says it like he's like the heart of the cards.
It's just like
fucking funny in the dub.
But I was just like, so what? You just got to say it, and all of a sudden you get the card you want.
Pretty much, you'd be like heart of the cards, and you just fucking do something stupid.
I know. It made me laugh, and so I saw this. I was like, oh man, the Maverick beat him to it.
See, we're totally on the same wavelength with that one, Dan. I think these other guys are kind of like, oh god, I don't know, I get what this is, Fucking,
I mean,
I'm there with you, bro.
well, you're
I remember
talking,
that.
you're talking anime, and it's like that's anime from when I was a kid.
I just so want to see the Maverick Yu-Gi-Oh parody now. Where it's
That would
like,
be awesome.
Heart of the
So
cards.
basically, let's start at the beginning then. So at the beginning of the film, you have this very Western scene. You have this very much like out of an old school Western scene where Maverick has a noose around his neck and he's got his hands tied behind his back. He's on horseback. And you got this really swarthy looking dude just kind of staring at him and saying, like, if you hadn't done what you've done, I might have let you live, but now I won't. And then,
like, I can't leave you out here by yourself. Here's some company.
Yeah, exactly. He leaves a bag of rattlesnakes for him. And it's like, I thought he might have been teasing. And then he's like, Lord, he's got the noose around his neck. Lord, whatever I've done to piss you off, if you let me know what it is, I promise to rectify the situation.
And that's when he said, make the Passion of the Christ known.
And then he goes into flashback mode, and it's a great flashback. Of course, there's just been a shitty week from the beginning.
Actually, though, they missed on a great opportunity that you got to see later on in the Coen brothers film, where you could have like gone up to the noose again and then turn to the guy and say, "First time."
But so basically, he's like, "Yeah, of course, my horse was stolen from me, and I had to ride into town on something less than a thoroughbred." So he rides in on a donkey. And then he's like,
teeny tiny donkey.
Teeny tiny donkey. And then you got this great scene, like, how much? By the day, week, or month? No, not just how much to take care of. How much to take him? That burro ain't worth $1. Well, sir, you got yourself a deal. So he like pays him $1 to take the burro. And then he goes.
If he talked like Eddie Murphy, he'd have been worth more than that.
So he's basically in I think it's Crystal Springs, I think is the name of the town. He has to hole up for the night because his business can't take place until the morning. The bank is closed. Mm-hmm. So he joins a poker game. And he joins a poker game that features Annabelle Bransford, a kid named Johnny Harden, who is based on an actual gunfighter named Johnny Harden, Angel, and who is played by Alfred Molina. Incidentally, Annabelle Bransford is played by Jodie Foster. And you also have 2 bit players who are well-known character actors. Art LaFleur has been in a ton of stuff over the years. And Leo Gordon had an original role in Maverick as Big Mike McComb. He showed up in 5 episodes and wrote 4 others. So you have a very interesting group around the table. And Maverick first, he comes up to the table. Is this seat taken? Well, it is, man.
Yeah. And that dude that he bumped into at the
and
bank.
Then he's like, and then Angel's like, I like the game just the way it is.
He's not about it at all.
Yeah. I bring all sorts of pleasantries to the table. I hardly ever bluff, and I never, ever cheat. And someone says, I don't believe it. He's like, well, neither do I. And he's like, now, gentlemen, I think I could change your mind. I promise to lose for at least an hour. And I love the white guy who says, my kind of poker player.
I love when he takes out his pocket watch and checks it all nonchalant, like he's serious.
He joins the game, and the first thing he does is he has his cards facing outside so everyone can see.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Annabelle leans over. He did promise to lose for at least an hour. I am a man of my word.
Yeah.
And so he does. He loses. And all the while, he's studying them. He is, as he explains later, I was learning your tells.
Yep.
But the first row he has is with Johnny Harden, and that's when he finally wins a hand. And this is a line I've used many times over the years. Gentlemen, I don't think this hand should count. Why? Do you have any logical reason why not? My mind wasn't
in the game. Yeah.
I've used that so many times. My mind wasn't on the game.
Well, one thing I have to say, sorry.
No, he looks like I mean, I don't know how close he looks to the actual guy, but I've noticed like a lot of those famous gunfighter guys are like weird looking dudes. You know?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually what I was. That's what I was gonna say. I liked that character for the simple reason that a lot of people in general, but especially like criminals, outlaws, tough guys of that period, like based on the photos we have, they were not really handsome guys. They were pretty ugly.
And also, I feel like there's a correlation with like the school shooter kids. Like back in the day, they would have been those assholes that shot a couple of people and then eventually got gunned down.
Something like that. Well, but it's that common thread,
From what I read, the original Johnny Harden was gunned down by someone he hired to gun down someone else. Yes. So, but I love that whole thing of my mind wasn't on the game. And then so Maverick, of course, bitches out because that was a trait of the original Maverick. He would do everything he could to avoid a gunfight. He would do everything he could to avoid a gunfight. And actually, he sums it up in the movie. My old papa used to say, he who fights and runs away can run away another day.
Yeah, he's a slippery snake. He's not a mangy mongoose, you know what I mean?
Exactly. But then he challenges Johnny. He's like, now if I were to go up, now I am a gambler. I'd like to become an old gambler. Now you, on the other hand, you're a gunfighter. An exceptional one from what I hear. Now, if I were to go up against you, what chance would I have? None. Absolutely none whatsoever. And he says this as he pulls his gun. Like, zoom.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It is so beautiful.
He baits him as he's saying this. He's like,
because he's waving his hands around and stuff during the scene, and he's like, I don't know, like I forget the word he uses when he first stands up and he pulls the gun, and he's like, whoa, I'm not trying to start anything. He says some old timey word for basically I'm just talking with my hands, you know.
Exactly.
And then I'm
just trying to expound, I think is
exactly. Yeah, that exactly. And he's like, I'm just, and then he's doing the whole talking with his hands thing, and then he whips the fucking gun like gunslinger style. And
exactly.
That's so badass. And then I love, obviously skipping ahead a bit later when they reveal when he reveals that he can't actually hit anything.
Right,
he's just super fast at drawing the gun.
He's like, I'm the fastest drawer there is, but I can't hit shit, especially when it's real people I'm hitting.
Like I'm just
apparently in the original series, I believe it was Bart Maverick who said that my brother is faster than me any day of the week. And he's the second slowest draw in the West.
Well, I have to say, I really, really love the fact that instead of like your usual gunfight, which we got when we get those later on, but like in the opening there, I'm really, really glad that we got to see something different, which was like a big sort of, it was like about as close to like a martial arts scene as you could get without it actually being a martial arts scene. But it's like it's the classic, one guy taking on several guys thing, but it's
to scare the other dude. Like that is actually a thing he used several times.
And then he toys with him.
Yeah.
He toys with him. He gets him to back down. He gets him to tuck tail and back down.
That exists in martial arts movies.
What is it? What was it, Stud? I think I prefer to draw. And he looks straight at him, and the guy's
And then it's like an old man joke, and all those other guys are like,
Exactly.
Well, I found it refreshing that you had well a fist fight of sorts, but something that was like equal parts comedic and equal parts really smart on his part. Like he had that as a character, he had that right balance of very intelligent but also really goofy and like cowardly yet brave at the same, like in the same action really. And it just I've never quite seen a character like that, and I thought that was very good writing.
Oh, right,
and
yeah, and like the whole way that they do because at that point, if you're going into the movie blind, he seems like he might actually be legitimately dangerous too, which he probably is and isn't,
he's dangerous in like a different sort of way, like in a way that you don't expect, because again, like Clint Eastwood never would have thrown a fit that his expensive shirt got shrunk in the washer. And like
you jumped ahead a little bit, but you had the part where the guys, the swarthy band of miscreants runs in. It's like, when I saw you through the window, you made me believe in the Almighty. And then they make him do this fisticuffs in the street. And then, so first of all, you have that great scene where he gives his gun belt to these kids. And he's like, if these fellas get to whooping me, you have my permission to shoot me.
Which is very wily samurai-like, you know what I mean?
And then, so he goes like up against these guys, beats the crap out of them. You see these reaction shots from Annabelle and Angel where they're both kind of like, oh, well, maybe this guy isn't a coward. And then he goes in, shit, my shirt's damaged. And he goes up against Angel. You said something. You called me a coward. No, I might have said cheat. I might have said a gutless cheat, but I didn't say a coward. A cheat. Yeah. Well, I was just teasing you. Teasing. Oh, I don't like being teased. And then, like, the Angel just go totally white.
And then he's just trolling him through the next little poker sit down. And the other kid's like, I'm going to leave y'all for the night. I think he says, I'm through with y'all for the night.
Yeah, Johnny does. Johnny leaves, yeah. But I love that part where Maverick backs Angel against the wall, teasing. I don't like being teased. And then he backs her up and he's like, oh, I was just teasing you.
Well, Riggs would do that same kind of thing to some street toughs where he would do like the crazy man Three Stooges routine and then all of a sudden pull out a gun on him. So, I mean, he did that kind of thing in Lethal Weapon.
A little differently in
there
this,
were a few Lethal Weapon. There were a few Lethal Weapon references.
Some parallels, but I mean, I think with this, it's more of an occasion because that whole sequence where he pulls the gun on the guy, like, sets up the different comedic nature of the character. And then later on, when it's revealed that he can't actually hit anything, that makes it even better.
The next day, when he goes to the bank, though, and the bank is held up, and the bank robbers, one of them is Danny Glover. And you also have our bud Corey Feldman, who we just watched in Rock and Roll High School Forever, and country star Hal Ketchum. The three of them are bank robbers.
Wow.
And,
I'll catch them.
Yeah, and you got Danny Glover comes up. He holds up the bank, and then Maverick looks at him funny. He pulls his scarf down. Nah.
Yeah, I love that. Handled so gracefully.
I'm getting too old for this shit.
That's where I was like not a fan of it, bro, because I feel like it was handled so gracefully in that one scene. Like, if they had just left it at that, it would have been perfect.
I thought that was funny. I mean, I was just glad to see him, and I was like, oh, I see.
Oh, for sure. But adding I'm getting too old for this shit.
Yeah.
Like that for me was too much.
You know, I'd forgotten that Donner was involved with Goonies. That explains Feldman's involvement, definitely.
Yeah. Well, there were
a lot of country stars in here, which is part of Ketchum being in there. He was on the soundtrack.
Like, I looked it up. I looked it up later, and apparently there were a lot of cameos of all kinds. Like there were
a lot of old Western stars.
And people that had worked with Richard Donner in the past on some level or another.
There were several people who this was their last film role. I mentioned that first cameo, that first poker tournament had Leo Gordon, who played Big Mike McComb in the original series. Denver Pyle, who played Brisco Darling on the Andy Griffith Show, has a role in the All River tournament as the old gambler who gets thrown off a boat for cheating. And there's a couple of other people. That part. Yeah, that was a great. That was great. We'll get to more of that later. But and then there were a few other people where this was their last film role, and a lot of them were just. And now I only really recently realized that Reba McEntire is apparently in that original poker sequence, which again, previous movie galore, hearkening back to our Tremors discussion. And apparently John Fogerty was one of the spectators for that fight sequence in the street. John Fogerty of Credence, for those of it
Clearwater.
Yes,
Revival.
I meant to say earlier to Brandon.
Down on the corner, out in the streets. Yeah.
I meant to say earlier with Brandon's fantastic Mr. Fox. Speaking of the voice of Mr. Fox, he happened to be in Ocean's 11, which was a card game.
Yeah. And also, you know, our prior one to this was The Beaver, which was by Jodie Foster. And her follow-up to that film was Money Monster, which featured George Clooney. So, yeah, there definitely are some parallels there.
But how do they all tie back to Kevin Bacon?
They do. You know they do.
Oh, of course they do.
Anyways.
But actually, like I said, you know, Kevin Bacon, of course, starred in Tremors. So there you go.
Here we are.
So at any rate, so after that first sequence and the bank sequence, you have the part where Maverick is accosted by the people who he beat up the night before. And this is where you get a very direct reference to the TV series and one of my favorite lines in the movie. These guys, they crowd him up, and they're like, oh, man, you know, did anyone see you? No. Well, you owe us, what was it, $10 a beating? Was that what it was? $5 a beating? I can't remember exactly. $5 a beating. Well, gentlemen, I was just in the bank, and you may not believe this, but they not only cleaned it up, they cleaned me out. Guy puts a gun to his head. Blowing my head off won't make you any richer. Sure gonna make me feel better.
Yeah.
And so he pulls his coat open. He opens up. One of the things in the series was both Brett and Bart always had $1,000 bill pinned to the inside of their coat. In this case, it was $100 bill. But anyway, he's like, oh, gentlemen, I honestly forgot. I always keep $100 bill pinned to my coat for such a rainy day occasion. And then you get the great line. Well, it's a good thing because it was clouding up pretty quick.
Of course, he takes more than $100 from them.
I don't know how much he takes from them. I haven't figured out.
Confusing math and maybe my drunk brain.
I love that. I love that.
For sure, one dude paid him 17.
And the guy's like, well, I've got.
When Angel accosts them, they're like, he paid us good too, $100 bill. They totally forgot how much they paid him.
Yeah, and the fact that their math was wrong, because I think there was like 5 of them, and they're like, that's 25 a piece.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
like, that's a good day's work. You gentlemen should have seen me first. I would have let you fall down for free.
And then okay, see, here's my biggest issue with the logic of the film, but I guess I can excuse it, is that he absolutely fucks those guys up.
Yes.
So why was he afraid of Maverick? Because he was able to. I would have figured it would have been like a Dragon Ball Z Kung Fu movie moment where they're like, bam. Let's fight, motherfucker, and then he just beat the shit out of him.
I do think there was a little bit. I have not fully, kind of in my mind, I have not fully figured out exactly. There is a telegraph that arrives halfway through the film where it says, "Keep Maverick out of the game," and it's obvious the Angel was already against him, and the Commodore
working for someone. Yeah,
the Commodore says as much at the end. He says Angel was already working for him,
so he couldn't kill him yet.
So you wonder what the importance of that telegram really was.
Well, I think they need what.
I wonder about that. I don't know.
They either didn't want him, okay, because it seems like the way the movie played out, which I'm sure we'll get to, is that they needed him either out of the game or they needed him to win so they could rob him.
Right. Now, of course, we didn't really say this, but of course, when Angel is first introduced, it's right after Maverick sells the burro, and he runs face to face with him. First time I slapped eyes on this hombre, I smelled trouble and refried beans. Yeah, that's probably not the most appropriate way to put it, but whatever. That's the way it was.
Well, but by contrast, you have to admit with the the Native American thing, like that was handled. I've never seen that was handled really well, really cleverly, really like.
I haven't really gotten to that, but yes, I love that whole thing. First of all, Graham Greene. Now, I know Graham Greene is the go-to guy. If you want a Native American in your movie, Graham Greene is the go-to guy. But he is awesome. Mm-hmm. And he is so good as Joseph. And I love the stuff that Maverick does, because Annabelle, basically, they put the lines in her mouth to show the prejudice against Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And I love the way Maverick tweaks her. And one of my favorite parts in the movie is where he's like, well, they may be just dimples in the dirt to you, Miss Bransford, but these are shod ponies, and Indians don't shoe their ponies. Well, the Indians, they probably just stole the ponies. Not everybody's like you, Mrs. Bransford.
Well, that and my favorite line was the fact that they were they're intruding on our land before we got here.
Yes. He goes on to say that. It's like, she says, what is it with you and Indians anyway? And he's like, well, nothing. I like to shoot one before breakfast. What about you, Coop? I figure it's their fault too for being on our land before we got here.
Yeah, like, see, that's great writing. That's a way that you can, like, normally I like, when movies adhere to the, historical, prejudices of a particular time period with in a dramatic film, it's like, even the best amongst them more than likely would have been at least a little prejudice relative to today. Now, if you're doing like a more comedic kind of thing, it's best.
I took it as like almost sarcasm. Like they're basically saying like, oh no, this is why people hate him. And
he's obviously buzzed with Joseph, even though he doesn't really trust Joseph. And Joseph doesn't
who really trusted anyone back then?
Nobody trusted anybody in this thing. But my point is, like, if you're doing like a more lighthearted comedic thing and you don't want it to be like a full-blown spoof, I think this was a good way to do that, because it feels like it's such that the modern audience can find it funny, but it's not so out of the realm of possibility for someone to have said it's not so like painfully winking to the camera or anything like that. Like I could buy like there would be that one guy who, you know, maybe he wouldn't be like a I don't know if there was like a Native American equivalent of like an abolitionist or something, but like I don't think he would have been quite like that. But you could have had that guy who would have, you know, had the gift of gab and would have just found different ways to troll people, you know, and to use their own logic against them and things like that. So that's what I thought was really smart about it. Like it doesn't feel like a 21st century person being transplanted back to that time period like a lot of movies do with their characterizations and dialogue. Like they don't feel like they're enough of in the period, and I felt like that was just the right
it was
amount.
in it, but it was like it was also, you know, depending on how you want to interpret it, a good joke.
Yeah, well,
and
you could believe that there would be that one guy who would just be that asshole to turn their logic back around on them, you know.
And they definitely they tweaked that a lot with the whole Archduke. We'll get to him in a minute. But like one of the more poignant.
Hold up.
Lines.
What's up, Brandon? What's up?
I was just going to try to say before we moved on from it that there have been characters similar to that in the past. Indian, not quite as obvious as it was there, but still a good. We referenced Blazing Saddles. There was a good example of one that was similar and done tongue in cheek. But if you want to go back to the time of Maverick, go back to the series F Troop as a good example.
What was the line in Blazing Saddles? It was something like they're describing all the people of like they're just good salt to the earth people or whatever. It was like a long line, you know, morons.
Yeah.
But yes, I and we kind of skipped a little bit of a scene I want to come back to, but there was one part that was very poignant that I thought was kind of earnest line in the movie, and that was the part where Maverick looks around and he's like, "Boy, you guys sure do pick the spots," and Joseph's like, "Yeah. I tell you, next time you people come and drive us up off our land, I'm going to pick a piece of swampland so god awful, maybe then you people will leave us the hell alone." Yeah, and it's funny, but on the other hand, it's very poignant. It really makes you think. It's like,
and unfortunately, kind of true.
Yeah,
that's very true. I mean, well, that's just it shows that William Goldman obviously did his
right.
You would have to do your homework on the realities of the
it's a deep cut for sure.
Well, it's basically the genocide that was done against the Native Americans, and you know, but you know, again, with anything dark about history, you know, and there's a lot of darkness in history. You know, there are ways to make it funny while speaking to the truth of what happened, and that's a good way to do it. You know?
And at the same time, if you were like some card gambling con man eccentric character, do you honestly think your life would be tempered with stories of all these, like you would have been fucking gallivanting through that shit like whoop, oh sorry, dead Indians, you know what I mean? Fucking, unfortunately that's the reality of it.
The episode that I
probably wouldn't be thinking about that shit.
The episode that I almost watched tonight that I didn't quite finish because reasons, and I'll come back to it. The episode I almost watched tonight was Brett and Bart Maverick had been pressed into service by the Union Army in their quest to fight the natives. And they were pressed into service to run a cattle drive through Comanche territory because they knew the territory. So in the original series, there was definitely a lot of the Maverick brothers knew the natives. They knew their customs. They knew the land. I haven't come across an episode yet where they were really friends with anyone like they were with Joseph, like Brett was with Joseph. But there is the precedent in the series that they had that Indian familiarity. You know what I mean?
Well,
so
I mean, if you think on it as like were it a realistic thing, maybe they wouldn't have shown that at the time when they made those original series, but it would have existed, you know.
Right. But like, at any rate, I do want to back up a little bit because before we get to Joseph, we have the whole sequence of Brett and Annabelle and Coop on the ferry. And of course, we have the scene before that. And this was the scene that I think was obliquely referenced in The Beaver, which was where after the game, Brett meets Annabelle. She's trying to skip town. He catches her. She's throwing her bags out the window. And he's like, and now I'd like you to do something for me. And he starts disrobing. Oh, how dare you! Not in a million years.
I love it.
I was 100 years old.
Like, I don't want to go to bed with you, lady. I want you to clean this motherfucking shirt.
I don't want to go to bed with you, lady. Well, why not?
Yeah, that's so classic. She wants it, dude. I mean, their banter back and forth throughout this entire movie is so solid.
And I still say Jodie Foster missed her calling as a comedic actress.
Seriously, she
did.
She was nailing it in this.
Well, she's just a good actress in general, and I mean,
but that whole scene though, and then afterwards, where after he like snaps his fingers and gets the wallet, he tips her into the window first.
Oh yes, she came to his room and tried to steal his wallet, and then he accosts her for being a thief, and then she comes back and succeeds.
She doesn't come
you were
back.
good.
She just stands there and
not just good.
Sweet talks them into making out again, and then she fucking Jackson.
And actually,
real.
This is another line I've used many times. Damn. Well, what? Well, you're just so irritating and likable.
I love it.
But I mean, they had great chemistry together. I mean, like I can see why, like, because. Like you had said in a previous episode that like on paper you would think that they wouldn't like each other, and yet you could really tell that they must have had a great time filming this, and their chemistry is so genuine and palpable, and well, in both movies in different ways, of course, very different characters, but like you can see the sincerity there, and it's such that I think it's a great thing that you can have people that are so opposite on paper, and yet not only do they
fucking well together, man.
Well, not only work together on screen, but then like when the chips were down for Mel in his own personal crises.
She got him in on the beef, and
she, Robert Downey Jr. and Whoopi Goldberg, they all came to his aid, and it just showed.
That aside, though, if you really are just looking at these two movies, holy shit, that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think that again, it just the on and off screen sincerity there is really kind of unheard of relative to all of the fair weather friendships that you see in not only in Hollywood but in the rest of the world. Like I've had so many people that in my life that wouldn't have come to my aid when the chips were down.
Us with that fucking beef. I don't think. I mean, maybe we know those people now, but I feel what you're saying, bro.
Well, my point is
that times where it's like not a motherfucker would have done that.
Well, that's my point is like the fact that they did come to his aid amidst all of the backlash that they would have gotten. Like again, that it says that they know the real person more so than the public would have, and
Mhm.
and that the quality of the friendship is so strong and real that they will stand up for something and someone, and it's like that shows a lot of courage, it shows a lot of character, and it's what I would want from my friends if my back was up against the wall. So
It's also especially
performances
interesting.
like this too. It's like
It's also especially interesting given how antagonistic Maverick and Annabelle are for much of the film. Because it's like when they get on the fair, well, first of all, he's like, well, I want you to do something for me. So he gives her his lucky shirt to clean. And then the next day, after the whole fiasco at the bank, he comes back to his room and he finds his lucky shirt wrapped up all neat and nice. And he goes to put it on, and it's short. She's hemmed it so that it's too short to fit his length of his arms. And he sees her running down the road toward the ferry. You wait! And then he goes running after her. Yes, he goes running after her. And he's like, you did this to me. Yeah, you bet I did. Do you know where this shirt comes from, lady? Paris, France. And she's like, why don't you go to the nearest dry goods store?
Excuse me, sir. He says, France, Paris, France.
Yes. Do you know where my underwear comes from? New York. And she's like, well, why don't you go to the nearest dry goods store and try the kitty department? He just about hauls off and hits her. Remove your hand from the lady. And that's where we met James Garner as Marshall Zane Cooper, who basically is the original Brett Maverick. Basically, the way he plays Zane Cooper, it's the original Brett Maverick. And Garner has said as much in interviews. Yeah, pretty much. Like total straight arrow, constantly the paragon of moral virtue, but he is involved in cards and that kind of thing. And then of course this starts a stream of great asides that Maverick has about Annabelle. There's one part where the old dude who rides the stage, they come to find out, like, why does everybody ask me that? Get me up there, old young time. And then it's like, and then the stagecoach takes off. The thief and the old guy find it kind of bumpy back here.
What do you guys think of that whole stagecoach sequence? I mean, just for real.
That was great. That was great. And it's like where he were at the end of it, where he gets thrown almost off the cliff, and he's like, "Don't you ever try to help me again." You
and then he gets help, and
help.
After he gets up, that Mel Gibson freak out, like that's so lethal weapon right there.
Yes.
Where he's like moving his fingers,
and both of them, both Cooper and Annabelle, have that ungrateful. But then you get a taste of how Annabelle's mercenary character, where they're burying the guy. Well, someone should probably say something nice about the deceased. Well, how do we know he's deceased? No, how do we know he's nice? Only thing he's got in his wallet. Of course, she looked at his wallet.
His list of names.
Only thing is a bunch of names of horror.
I thought that guy was like a legend right there. I was like, yeah,
exactly. I'll bet if he had money, she would have said nothing about the whorehouses. I guarantee you that.
He knows something about pounding the pillow, Cody.
Well, there was some pillow pounding going on the boat there, and of course there was an ulterior motive. She was trying to keep him away from the table.
You're watching right now. Virtual fist
wheel.
You little puppet bastard.
Well, there was nothing wrong with the wheel.
My dude
I got a real good close look at the wheel from underneath. I love the part where he gets up there. I love the part where he gets up there and he throws the guy back, and he's hanging over the side. Then Maverick pulls him up. And then she's like, and then Annabelle smacks him. You poked me in the eye.
Oh, I love that when he pops back down. She's like smacking him multiple times in the face.
Yeah. And then, of course, they sing Amazing Grace because they don't know what else to do. And that, of course, comes back later in the film in wonderful ways. But, yeah, so then they come across the wagon train. And that's where you see, I don't know if you noticed, Mary Margaret and Margaret Mary. Did you recognize either of them? Because one of them, I think it's Margaret Mary. I can't remember which one because they run together in my mind. I think it's Margaret Mary. The one who had the wedding dress that was missing was actually Margot Kidder. Lois Lane.
There you go.
Yes. So nice little Superman reference there. I love that. And she was playing a very crazy woman.
Let me just say this before we get into the scene. The soundstage vibe of the next sequence that we're going to talk about is absolutely delicious. Can you guys agree?
Soundstage vibe.
It feels like it was shot on the soundstage, was it not?
Oh, the whole around the campfire thing?
Yeah.
Yes. So basically, this wagon train was supposedly attacked by engines. And they took the music box and the wedding dress that this one was going to have for when she got married, and she's not a winner. Let's put it that way.
I remember one of those.
They took all her money. What was it? Was it 30,000?
Something like that.
I think it was 30,000. It's like, what? And Annabelle pops in. What kind of animal are you? Is that 30,000? But actually, Annabelle, you notice in the film, Annabelle is prone to pratfalls. It's actually a kind of an amusing little aside. Apparently, one of the first scenes they filmed was Brett helping Annabelle down from the stagecoach, where she puts out her hands and he grabs her parasol. And she has to get down on her own. And apparently her ripping her dress as she fell was unscripted, and Richard Donner liked it so much he decided she needed to be clumsy in the film. So he filmed a whole bunch of pratfalls from Annabelle because of that accident.
It's funny. It's like
I love that.
Let's film you fucking up some more. You know?
Exactly, yes. But I love that she puts her hands out with the parasol and Brett grabs the parasol. And it fits perfectly with his whole tweaking her for being a thief and a con artist. You know, he doesn't treat her like a lady after that first scene. And it's not because he's a bastard, it's because he's realized she's a thief. And I don't typically go for bullying, but I feel like she deserved it in this movie.
I forgot what it was what I was watching recently, where someone was like, I don't know what the fuck it was, man. But someone said some shit like, a woman's suffering is never entertainment.
Yes,
and someone
that was from this one. That was from
was
this
that
one.
from this?
Yes, it was. Annabelle is talking. She's like crying to Keith, and Maverick is like, "Now I can't quite place your accent, Mrs. Bransford. Whereabouts in South are you from? You ever been to Mobile?
And she can never get like when they're on the ferry later. She gets all weird when he asks her about it.
Yeah. Like, he's like, oh, you mean Mobile, Alabama? Oh, hell, I've been there. I bet we know some of the same people. You start. And then she goes, oh, man.
Totally weird that I forgot that was from this movie. Yeah. But that's cool. It's the same thing. Then, thanks, man.
And then like, a woman's suffering is not a funny thing, Birdie boy.
Yeah,
there are exceptions. Watch your billfold.
Sometimes it is a bit funny.
It's like I said, he's straight up bullying her, but he's doing it in a way where he's tweaking her for being a thief. And he deserves it. It's like, and one of my favorite lines in the whole movie is where she gets kicked out of the big game. Oh, well, I'll just pretend like I was playing with someone else's money. It shouldn't be too hard.
Okay.
I love it. But anyway, so we've got.
I love the strategy of just throwing them overboard to the goddamn cheaters.
So they go after these so-called engines, and then you have that great scene that we talked about, we alluded to before, where they're, quote, tracking them. And that was the part where he's like, not everybody's like you, Mrs. Bransford. And he's like, oh, you see that hawk? Oh, don't shoot the hawk. No, I'm not going to shoot the hawk. You know what that hawk means? What? Absolutely nothing. But you didn't know.
Oh, he's trolling her the whole time until he lays down. That's
he
like
was totally trolling her.
Movie.
He's totally trolling her that whole time. She's trying to prove that she deserves the money, and he's like, what are you going to do for your money? So then they meet the people around the campfire, and first of all, he has the discussion with Coop and Annabelle. Now, this ain't going to be another wheel coming off, right? You're going to have my back. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I love that part where he's like, that was about broken bones. This is about dying.
Yeah.
And he fucking pulls
out. He takes her gun. And then he goes in and addresses the people. Listen up. Wake up, folks. Okay, so each of you's got a gun pointing at your pretty little head. Whistle, folks. And then they can't whistle. What is this, another wheel coming off? Clap if you can't whistle. And then so they start clapping, really pathetic. You know, the first one you got after you is Marshall Zane Cooper. Now I know what you're thinking. He guns his food and his women. But he can still shoot straight. And after him is the ugly Annie Bransford. She was born, she was ugly. Her parents had to tie a pork chop around her next to the dog.
I love that fucking part so much.
And then, oh, you're all right, Bart. I think that was the only mention of Bart in the whole film, actually. That was...
I think she always calls him Bert.
She calls him Bert. Yeah, she keeps calling him Bert. And that was it. So they take these guys in, and then, you know, well, if it wasn't them, then who you suppose was beating all them drums? Annabelle. Well, maybe it was them. And you see the Indians led by Joseph. And then you got the great scene where Brett is talking with Joseph in the Indian tongue, and no one else has any idea what he's saying. And he's like, oh, point at her. Say you want her. I do want her. Is she available?
So classic.
And then he does this great thing where he's basically gaslighting them in order to gaslight everyone else. And he has this. You see this? What he did? They cut off both your hands. If you don't make a sound, you pass. And so he goes to do the Indian bravery test, and that's why I say I wonder if the beaver was a callback to this whole idea, in the sense that he did cut off his hand. And there's the scene later on the riverboat where Brett meets Annabelle. Well, I'm not exactly a whole man. And he puts up one hand, and he puts up the one where, and she's like, and then he puts up the hand, she slaps. So I wonder if they intentionally called back to that with the beaver.
I think it has to be, dude.
It has to be. I think it's great if they did.
I don't see any way that couldn't be a callback to that.
Yeah.
You know?
But I love the part before he goes off to be with the Indians. He has the great parting line to Annabelle. Well, now if they cut my hands off, my lucky shirt will fit.
Yes.
That's like, talk about making her feel terrible. So there's some good stuff there. And he meets Joseph, and you had the whole thing where Joseph played a trick on him, making him think Annabelle stole the money. And that was kind of interesting. And then they had the whole thing with the Russian Archduke. And that was a fun sequence. It's like he's trying to kill Joseph. Wait, you want to see dead? Wait, I have an idea. And so they meet the Russian Archduke, and that's like, and this was another line that's stuck in my head that I've used a few times over the years. I kill everything in sight. It is boring me. Wait. So you want to see greatest Western thrill of all? What is greatest Western thrill? Kill Injun. Kill Injun. Is it legal here? So basically, they have Maverick pretending to be an Indian, dying anyway, smoked too much tobacco. and then I love the part where after Maverick is, quote, killed, what, are you going to leave him here for the vultures? I never like him much anyway. It's so wrong, but I love it. But so you have this whole thing where, and also you had that scene where, unbeknownst to Maverick, Joseph had conned the Duke out of a lot of money. And it finally comes up, wait, that's not $500. That's $1,000. Wait, $1,000? What, the Big Dons probably would have gone for $2,000. No, that's too much. He doesn't know Joseph pocketed $1,000 out of the deal. Because Joseph is, and again, he does a good job. Graham Greene is great. He is great. He is kind of the go-to guy if you need a, quote, Indian, Native American, whatever in your movie. Graham Greene is, it's one of those unfortunate things where they should cast more people than just the one. But he is so good at what he does. And he was really good in this role. And he really did play him.
For being awesome just because.
He really did play him as big a con artist as Maverick, if not more so. It's like, and there's the one part, I really knew I needed to hightail it out of there before Joseph came up with a scheme to help me reinvest my newly acquired $1,000. And it's like, yes, so true. I mean, what Jane was saying earlier, this was very much an episode within the movie, but it was a great episode. You know what I mean? Like it was a big part.
Well, and then I was trying to say earlier, if they could have taken a revolutionary route and adopted the Lady Snowblood format, where it's like every bit of it was, broken up into chapters, and narrated by Mel Gibson or whatever.
Right. But then, of course, you have after the scene with Joseph, Maverick. You then see the Lorne Bell, the riverboat, where the All Rivers tournament is going to take place. And you see Maverick mixing with the crowd, and he comes across Annabelle, and he finds out that not only is he still $2,000 short of the entry fee, she's $4,000 short. But then he sees the Duke, and he's like, "Oh, you just sit on that, Mrs. Bransford. I'll be right back." And he goes up, Maverick, Indian Affairs. It's like, he's like, now Joseph talked. Oh, I don't know anyone of that name. Well, that's what he said at first when I started investigating the murder. But he talked, And then, so basically he cons the Duke out of $6,000, which is enough to put him and Annabelle into the game. And it is notable as well that when he goes back to greet Annabelle, she is speaking to a member of the upcoming game. There are a lot of country artists and Western stars who cameo in this final game. James Drury, Waylon Jennings, Kathy Mattea. Supposedly,
I feel like at some point on PBS they did a thing for Maverick where they talked about that. Actually,
but at this point, you see the first appearance of Clint Black he is talking to Annabelle as Maverick goes up and gives her the money. So then you go into the Lorne Bell. You see the Duke wandering off on his own little steamboat. He apparently is done with this country at this point. Because Maverick not only finds him $6,000, he ends up taking everything else in his wallet. Which actually, the original Maverick probably wouldn't have done that. He was a little more scrupulous. But this version of Maverick was willing to, the guy killed someone for sport, He or thought he did anyway. You know what I mean? So then you get the main game. You get the big game, the All Rivers tournament. 20 players, 25 grand a piece, if I remember correctly. For what was it? An even $500,000 was the final pot. And
500,000.
yeah. So you get all these people, mostly played by Western stars. You get people like Dennis Fimple and Denver Powell, again, shows up in this part, James Drury and whatnot. And then you got, you do have the cameo from Clint Black as the, quote, fresh-faced gambler. And then you've also got Maverick, Annabelle, Angel, and this is where you meet the Commodore Duvall, who's played by the late, great James Coburn, who is brilliant in this role. And you also find out that Marshall Cooper, James Garner's character, is running security for the tournament. So he has this interesting little improv bit. Apparently, Garner goofed, and Richard Donner liked it so much he kept it. When Garner's like, anyone who, if you carry a gun, you better be a faster draw than me. And then he tries to put his gun back in the belt and misses. That was unscripted. That was a goof. And Donner liked it so much he kept it in the film. And I believe it was Commodore who handed the gun back to Goof. It was actually a pretty good little sequence. It made everyone feel a little more at ease. Yeah. So that was, but basically the idea is you don't cheat, you don't carry a gun, or you get thrown off the boat. So as the game goes on, Clint Black gets thrown off for cheating. Denver Powell gets thrown off for cheating. Waylon Jennings and Catherine Mattea play a married couple who get caught with guns and get thrown off for carrying guns. And incidentally, Clint Black and Waylon Jennings and Tracy Lawrence all have songs that play during this sequence. And in fact, A Good Run of Bad Luck, one of my favorite songs ever, was released as the music video for the film. They actually released a very simple, if you guys didn't watch the video yet, I recommended it. It was apparently the first video Clint Black himself directed. And they did a very simple soundstage of him and the band interspersed with scenes from the movie. But it's a fun video nonetheless. But you also hear Tracy Lawrence, Renegades, Rebels, and Rogues. And you hear Waylon Jennings, You Don't Mess Around With Me. And Restless Heart, who contributed to the soundtrack, plays the house band on the boat, which is kind of cool. So there's a lot of cameos there. Like I said, supposedly Vincent Janisgill, but after 15 years of watching the movie, I still can't figure out who they are. And some other folks as well. And Dan Hedaya. We mentioned Addams Family earlier. Dan Hedaya was a supporting character in Addams Family. He plays one of the gamblers who is the very twitchy, I think he's called the twitchy gambler. I think that was his alias. And one of the dealers, the one at Maverick's table, I don't remember the actor offhand, but he's the actor who played Riggs and Murtaugh's captain in the Lethal Weapon series. And you notice when Maverick wins, there's a very terse handshake. And partly that's because when he stands up, the chair stuck to his butt. And that was an accident that they kept in the film. But also, he gives a very terse handshake as an inside joke to Lethal Weapon, which I thought was kind of fun.
That is fun.
Yeah.
For sure.
But anyway, before we get to the final big match, did anyone have any commentary to catch up? I've kind of been running it for a bit.
Not that I know of.
Okay. So we get to the final match, where it turns out that the final winners, of course, are Maverick, Annabelle, the Commodore, and Angel. And Maverick and Annabelle have a nice little tryst between their match and the final match, which is the sequence, incidentally, where you hear Waylon Jennings playing in the background and Waylon and Kathy get thrown off the board. Yeah. For carrying
I don't
guns.
know what it is about this, but I've never found Jodie Foster hotter than in Maverick.
That's because she's ripping you off.
And actually, there's that one part where it's like right after they have their little tryst, Coop sees Annabelle in the hall. Well, Annabelle, you're looking particularly ravishing for 5 a.m. Nice glow about you. And she runs into the door because she's distracted by his compliment. And of course,
my experience with Jodie Foster as a kid at the time was like, check out, Clarice Starling. And it's pretty serious, and then my uncle's like, look at Taxi Driver, and you're like, oh, yeah. And then you see her in this, and it's like, oh my god, she's hot.
She was much closer in this to Clarice Starling than she was. This was what, 3 years after?
You know what I mean? Like as a kid, fucking. I don't know if you saw Taxi Driver back then.
I did,
but
it's been a minute. I did not see Taxi Driver as early as also Maverick. Let's put it that way. I did see.
I thought right after, basically Silence the Lambs.
Right.
My uncle thought that was a good idea.
So basically, you got the big game where the winners of the 4 small games get together for the big game. And Annabelle's the first one to leave. And that's, again, where you have that great line where Maverick bluffs her out of the game, basically. And it's like, you put me out of the game. You put me out of the game. I didn't, she names all her tells. I didn't even flick my teeth. You held your breath. What was that? And she goes around the table, and everyone's like, yeah, you held your breath. And he's like, well, yeah, when you get excited, you tend to breathe heavily. Well, I'll just pretend I was playing with someone else's money. It shouldn't be
those moments in Maverick take the place of the gunslinger moments in other westerns.
Right. And then, of course, you go to the next big scene where the Commodore is very hot on his hand, and Angel is very hot on his hand, and Maverick is like, I think I could make this work. And so the Commodore goes, well, it looks like I'm sucking hind tit here. I'll just bet everything I have. And Angel's like, well, this should cover the Commodore. He looks at Maverick. I guess we're about even. I'm going to raise you everything I've got. It's $500,000 to the winner. And then you got this, Maverick takes the bet without even, and he does this weird thing. Like, I like a new deck, a new cut, and a new shuffle. That's not permitted in the rules. You can have a new dealer if you like. So he has Angel deal him a card, and he very specifically says a card off the top will be sufficient because he saw the dealer dealing sneakily to Angel and the Commodore. And so he does this. He does the straight arrow approach. He puts everything on the line without checking the card. And both the Commodore and Angel are freaking out over it.
Drum roll moment.
Yes. You have this great drum roll moment. And Angel and the Commodore's like, well, I have 2 pair. 8s and 8s. And so he puts the cigar in his mouth. He's got the big shit-eating grin. And then Angel's like, you're not going to check your card. How you going to know if you're going to beat my straight flush? And I love that moment because I love where Commodore's, the cigar goes from up here to down there. And then, Maverick's like, he just starts putting it out. And I think they call it what do they call that? Do they call it high rolling or highballing or something? It supposedly is a major breach of etiquette for poker. I mean, it's basically
It works, though.
but it worked thematically for the movie. He puts down a ten of spades, jack of spades, queen of spades, king of spades, possible royal flush. And he puts down he pulls up the ace, and then he does this sort of, he deflates. And he just throws it out there, and it's the ace of spades, and it's like, and that's where, the fit hits the shan, Angel pulls a gun, his cohorts pull a gun, Maverick and Coop between them gun down all three of them. And then Commodore has this great, like, shit, your security ain't worth a damn. Everyone's got a gun.
That's how it works.
Exactly. And then you have the presentation of the money where Coop takes the money and runs. And then later you have the campfire scene where you learn that Coop and the Commodore were in it together. And Maverick sneaks up on them. He gets the money back. Coop beats the Commodore. And you go to the bathhouse scene where you have
the bathhouse is the real badass end of the movie.
You have the rare cameo from Richard Donner's wife, Lauren Shulen Donner. I think she's only had like 3 film credits, and she plays the bathhouse attendant. And then, Maverick had made the comment, decrepit old has-been, couldn't sneak up on a corpse. So Coop sneaks up on him. Decrepit old has-been, couldn't sneak up on a corpse. Your money's 8 feet away from you, and your gun, your money's in that satchel, and your gun's 8 feet away from you. Not smart. Not smart at all. And then he starts, Maverick's like, well, my old pappy used to say, he does one of those old pappy references, which is, again, a reference to the show. And then Coop gets kind of, I never said that. And he sticks him underwater and ruins the cigar. And he grabs another cigar and starts to light it. And he's like, he says that. And he puts him underwater. Pappy, you told me these damn things are $1 a piece. You brought me up to save money. That's where you find out they're actually related. It's a nice little last minute twist. It's a lot of fun.
I feel like all of the backstabbing towards the end is what Pirates of the Caribbean really wanted to be in those later movies when they were doing the same thing, but they just didn't do it with the skill level that this one did.
Man, if William Goldman had been writing for the Pirates series, it might have been a true classic.
Dude, if this was a trilogy, it would have been a fucking absolute powerhouse.
Exactly. But at any rate, they so you have the whole thing, and then Coop, he's in the tub next to Maverick, and then Annabelle shows up. He's like, well, I certainly hope this shirt fits you. It's from the finest shirt makers in San Francisco. And then she takes the money and runs. And it's like, but first she's like, Ma, what a remarkable family. How'd you figure that? Well, you don't have the exclusive on tails. You're both the same height, same build. You both draw your gun the same way. You both kiss the same way. You both got the same wrong words to Amazing Grace. And then you get this part where she looks at both of them. My, what a remarkable family. From the looks of things, I'm going to tell the lady to bring more hot water.
Cover your eyes, Cody.
Exactly. That's not a family-friendly moment. And that's, you get the thing where it's like, he's like, well, we ended up with a $500,000 silk shirt. No, we ended up with a $250,000 silk shirt because my old pappy used to say, don't put the cart before. No, don't put the. Don't ever put your eggs in one basket. Now that I did say. So I got a boot for you. Hands him the boot. And the other one's twice as heavy. Brett, my boy. What are kids for? I like the boot back though. I like that. And he's like, I don't know why I left the other half of the money in the satchel. Coop's like, yeah, I know why you did. Yeah, I do too. It'll be a whole lot of fun getting him back. And then he's like, he asks him about it. It's like, nah, there's something I gotta know. How did you pull that ace of spades? You're not gonna believe what I told you. I'm your father. I'll believe you. Magic. So and then he finally gets that confirmation. I believe you. And it's like this is nice upbeat ending. And then they go into this great countrified version of Amazing Grace. I love that version of Amazing Grace. And then what should have been the Oscar-nominated original song of the year, Randy Newman's "Ride Gambler Ride." That was a good song. That was one of his best songs. He should have been up for original score too. He really should have. The film was up for costume design. I give it that.
Yeah, good costume design.
It was great costume design. But anyway, so that's like the basic rundown, and we're at 2 hours. So I guess we're about time to start talking about favorites, right? First of all, does anyone have anything I missed or that we missed overall that they really wanted to cover? I guess not. Okay, so who wants to talk about favorites? Mo?
No. I think my favorite scene in the entire movie is probably just that scene where he fucking chucks her back into her window. Like that whole sequence where he's like, "Yeah, I caught you." He chucks her into her window before he even bothers to get his wallet back.
He threw her out the window. Only in this case, he was throwing her in the window.
And just their whole chemistry through the whole movie, and then all of them, the whole principal cast was amazing. That trio of characters should have done at least 2 more movies.
Right. All right. How about you, Dan?
Let me think. I think I liked everything having to do with Graham Greene just because of how fresh that dialogue felt and how genuine that friendship felt. Like, I was impressed with the fact that even though these characters that pop up are relatively incidental, you do get the sense that they've had quite a history with Maverick, and nowhere is that better communicated than in that scene. And just the exchanges they have, I was like, I never heard that kind of dialogue in that setting before, so that was really awesome.
Right. How about you, Dave?
Well, I did not grow up on this movie like you did, so I guess I didn't have as much of a love for it. But I did enjoy the scene where all those bandits decided to accost him like the next day, and when he had to ask for change, and they were all exchanging coinage and whatnot while he's taking their money. So
I think he generally came out better than you thought.
Well, I'll have to watch this movie a couple of times before it sits in on me. For somebody who grew up on westerns and war movies and western comedy, it's not easy for me to watch. I don't know, Mel Gibson in this kind of a role. I mean, I can see Garner in this role. So but I enjoyed the dialogue of his Indian friend. the most in here for some reason. Just the fact that he showed up with his war party, and nobody understood Indian. So when he was telling him, okay, just play along with me, act like this, that was kind of comical.
And then when he's like, is this going to take long? It's getting hot.
Right.
And I like the whole thing with him and the Archduke. Like he's like big asshole. And they greet him in French. No. Pangle. How white man.
I guess I have to just get rewatch it because it's the movie is on its way to me. Thanks to the pandemic, it's slowing its pace to getting here. So I bought mine off of eBay. I probably should have bought mine off of Amazon.
Okay, you never know nowadays. Honestly, I've gotten really good shipment on eBay items, except for Shigeki Ekiden.
It doesn't matter right now, man. It's all coming to us, and it's all mostly people trying to avoid.
If it comes to California, it sits there for like about 3 weeks, then goes to Chicago, and it's like it's got to go under everybody, including the mob, and then then probably going to eventually show up here. But I want my shit.
Here's hoping that they simply set it aside and forgot about it. And it's not like if you watch my pickup video from this week on Septum Sin versus World, where I talk about Fushigi Yakuden, where it's clearly obvious that the post stations all along the way saw this, said, oh, well, this is a piece of crap OVA. We're going to use it as a doorstop before we send it along. I swear to God, that's what they did. It took at least a month for me to get that item, and it looked like they used it as a doorstop.
Well, while we're on the subject, I do just want to, make this known, from me and to every other local post office employee to you. We would rather this not be going on as well.
Well, very good. Most of the
Shit.
stuff I've gotten has looked really good.
Oh, yeah.
Most of it has arrived quickly. For the most part, I've been very impressed. But that one item, the only explanation is they must use it as a doorstop.
They sensed how terrible it was.
Exactly.
A lot of times that's handed to me like that, like, and then I have to take it to your house. It's not your mailman that's doing that.
Yeah. That's unfortunate when that happens, I gotta say. But I think it happened early on because I'm pretty sure it was in California for at least a couple of weeks before it ended up moving. But anyway, so I guess, Brandon, your take, favorites or whatnot.
Well, I didn't really have much of a changed opinion of the movie from the second time, from the first, but I did enjoy that scene where they're pulling out the thing to show the $20,000. It's like I always wanted to know what $20,000 sounded like. And
Yes.
you did that to pull a joke on him, but unlike, but that surprised me in a couple of ways. One, it surprised me that he was pulling the joke and that he had come out of it. And the second was that he didn't steal anything from Maverick in regard to that, which is also something I expected at least other. So I was quite happy with that scene.
He's like, cool. I've never seen 20,000. Can I see it? Well, hell, you could roll in it.
He was legitimately curious about it. He wasn't planning on doing it. So that was cool. Yeah. One of the few straight out things.
Yeah. And if it's not clear already, I love this whole movie. I have trouble picking a particular favorite. I do love the commentary on the Native American plight. Like the whole thing of, not everybody's like you, Mrs. Bransford. Or the I figure it's their fault too for being on our land before we got here, because I happen to believe fully that we screwed over the Native Americans. I fully believe this. I don't.
It's just facts. It feels like.
Yes, we fully did, and it's
not even just a screwing over with the land, but it's like a full-on genocide. Because of the smallpox
people
blankets
try
and
to
all
act
that.
like it's like a minor inconvenience. It's like, yeah, it's totally a bummer that I came here and fucking like started killing a bunch of your relatives. And
I don't know if this is probably.
I'm not personally sorry for it because I didn't do it, but I get it.
This is probably a controversial view, but one of the reasons I have such an issue with Pocahontas is because I feel that the whole idea of lionizing her for basically making it easy for the British to colonize Virginia, well, that's a very Eurocentric viewpoint, and it's probably not the viewpoint that most Native Americans would have of that particular individual.
Plus, Pocahontas was 12 years old.
Okay.
Time that she met John Smith.
Yeah, hold on. I'll be the first to say that, like, I definitely grew up with Pocahontas just being like a thing.
Yeah.
I have like Native cousins that because that actually looked a lot like that chick.
I grew up
basically, like I said, my point is, like, in particular, like, I have issues with the movie on multiple levels, but that's one of the reasons. But in general, the heroes that we tend to put forward to, I grew up in Virginia. In Virginia, Pocahontas is considered a hero.
Yep.
But it's, when you think about it, from the Eurocentric viewpoint, but is she really from the Native American viewpoint? I really wonder. So,
you'd have to ask them, I guess. But I grew up with Pocahontas. That was one of the first Disney films I saw. So I'm a little. I remembered seeing commercials for it when it was new. So I'm a little biased on that level, but I completely understand every criticism against it.
I'm in the camp of, like, I thought the fucking raccoon and the hummingbird were super cute.
I like the fact that they didn't. I like the fact that they didn't talk for once. I was like, that was refreshing.
From a naturalist standpoint,
it's pretty fair that it's inaccurate and racist.
From a naturalist standpoint, they did a good job of capturing the behavior of a hummingbird. They did do that because that hummingbird was very territorial and possessive, and that is true of hummingbirds. But anyway, but my biggest thing, again, I generally hate to be the sort that applauds bullies. I don't. I think bullies suck. But I think that when someone is being bullied because they brought it on themselves, I love the way Maverick constantly tweaks Annabelle for being a thief and a con artist. Almost every comment he makes about her is tweaking her for being a thief.
Yeah,
and
I wouldn't even call it bullying, though. I would just call him trolling the shit out of her.
He was trolling this. Yes. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
That's what he's doing through most of the movie, man. Like, he's just trolling those motherfuckers.
Yes, and that was probably my favorite thing. I love, like I said, at the end where she loses and she's like, "I was just playing with someone else's mind. Shouldn't be too hard." I just love that. And I feel like that was so good. But again, this is a William Goldman script. It was completely peppered with wonderful bits of dialogue. It was totally peppered with it.
It was.
And he should have been prouder of this screenplay than he was. He really, and this should have been an Oscar nominee adapted screenplay. It should have been up for adapted screenplay.
I feel it.
And again, I love the music. I did go when the movie was big, when I was huge into the movie, I was a big country fan. I was a huge Clint Black fan. I've cooled on that over the years, but I still think it's still a kick-ass soundtrack. It is still a great soundtrack. So yes, so it's got some great moments, and so yeah, that's my take on it. So
you have a large belt buckle to match your Clint Black this.
I never did get the big belt buckle. I do have a bolo tie that I wear on very rare occasions. And I did get a Stetson hat, but I very rarely wear it.
True shit. I have like fucking 15 bolo ties, and I have been in several parades as a child and as a tiny adult, I guess, in my teenage years. Because my parents had an art gallery, so I'd always have to like ride out there with the bolo tie and the fucking shirt, and then it'd be like on a bicycle. Like,
and I will say one more thing as far as favorites. And I think Mo, I think you were the one who really touched on this earlier, if I'm remembering correctly. I am a little toasted, so maybe I'm not. The chemistry between Mel Gibson, Jodie Foster, and James Garner was brilliant.
It's beautiful.
The chemistry between the three of them was brilliant.
It might be one of the best examples of that. Like a lot of movies can pull that off with like two characters, you know.
Yeah.
But they pulled it off with three, like flawlessly throughout the entire fucking movie.
And the others too. I mean, James Coburn and Graham Greene and everyone
they're all good. But, you know, those principal characters are like they have that chemistry throughout the entire movie. You know,
and a lot
right to the end.
A lot of these people are underrated. Jodie Foster's underrated as a comedic actor.
For sure, she
Alfred
is.
Molina is just straight underrated. He was robbed of an Oscar nod. He was robbed of an Oscar nod for both Frida and in Education. He was brilliant in both films, and he was great in Spider-Man too. I mean, you know, so there's a lot of really great talent there.
Yep.
Fucking A, man.
Yeah.
I mean, Maverick is a beast of a movie, no matter which way you look at it. You know, and I think the people that don't really go into it expecting that.
Oh, I do want to mention one random thing that is an unfortunate. Warner Brothers has done some questionable things over the years, which it definitely has affected the DCEU to no unfortunate degree. Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman and so forth. But Warner's did one really messed up thing, and that is when the original TV series aired, the creator, Roy Huggins, was chipped out of residuals because Warner's chose to lead with an episode that he did not have a hand in. And they did that intentionally to jip him out of creator residuals. Maverick the movie is the first time Roy Huggins was credited on screen for creating Maverick.
It's fucked.
That is messed up on Warner's part, but it is a cool thing about the movie. They set the record straight. Yes. So, anyway, that's, I guess, all I have to do on that. We've run really long.
Well, the only other similar thing was DC screwed over Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster for Superman, but then with the publicity of Richard Donner's film of Superman, that's how they got the restored byline on Superman, even though DC kept the rights, but they did get a pension from DC, so you know that's another instance of creators being screwed over.
Well, even so, we talked earlier about Richard Donner's official cut of Superman 2. That was a film that Warner kind of ripped out of the hands of the creator, and
Well, that we have that. Incidentally, I just recently acquired that shit. So
anyway, so are we ready for wrap up? Is that everyone's? Are we good? Okay. So who wants to lead?
Well, my name's Mo. I do videos occasionally for a channel called Drunken Master Studios. This has been yeah, it's occasionally fun, and I really enjoy doing stuff with these guys. I think this has been a good discussion, and yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Very cool. How about you, Dane?
I am Dane Kyle, aka Dane Damarung on YouTube. I'm on a channel called Indie Horror Film Creative, where I do a show called Blu-ray Views, where I do a lot of unboxings of Blu-rays, and I'm doing more reviews of, well, specific films as well as other film topics. Like I did an episode about films that I found that disturbed me the most, and why it's important for people to watch disturbing films to kind of fortify them for the real horrors of life, and to kind of conquer the demons inside, so that the demons outside are easier to fight. And yeah, I do things like that. So yeah, Indie Horror Film Creative. I'm a filmmaker trying to, get back in the swing of things now that, the big, now that my personal life is finally starting to stabilize, and, things are looking up again. It's like, okay, now I can relax a little bit. But yeah, stay tuned for more cool videos like that.
All right. How about you, Brian?
Well, I'm Septum Sen of Septum Sen versus the World. I run a channel which we dedicate to physical media and the collection of physical media. We do various side projects, and of course, none the least is our discussion group, the Vlogcast, which is kind of a free-form entertainment group. We kind of just start on a topic, and then it seems like it just flows out naturally from there. With that being said, of course, I also do work with Inside Movies Galore and help do the scheduling when it comes to the movies. I had been handing these over to the people who are dedicated to next week, but we will be seeing a return of Dustin to our group next week, as he tackles two films of his that are favorites, Alligator and Crawl. So that's going to be a very fun and entertaining week.
Okay, good deal. And Dave, I guess I'll go ahead and go, and you can take over.
Okay.
And I am Codebookie Jake, and hold on a second.
And he disappears.
And I'm David Straggy. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore, while we wait here for Kabuki Jake. He does his own channel and his own thing with nature videos. From what I understand, he's also the Robin to Septum's Batman on Septum Sin versus the World channel, and I know he's got some very cool pickup videos for you to check out on his channel, if of those of you that do want to and be inspired by video personality thing. And I also moonlight myself on another channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I do video pickup videos and video reviews of my own. So I somewhat kind of did a little bit of an intro or outro for you while you were gone.
Sorry about that. I got pulled away abruptly. So basically, I'm go to Bookie Jake. I'm often on Septum Sin versus the World, and I definitely appreciate everyone taking as long as they did on this movie, because this was one that, like I said, was a favorite of mine for a long time, and it's still a favorite. As I've said before, I know of the concept that I've read from Quentin Tarantino of the so-called hangout films that you watch just because you love spending time with the characters. This is one of those films for me. It's one I love spending time with the characters. So,
and I guess I really myself have to rewatch this a couple of times. I'm hoping that this film will grow on me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Myself. I mean, it's one of those films I missed out on the opportunity to watch at the time.
I think that's true of a lot of William Goldman's films. I mean, I need to see Butch Cassidy more than I have. I've probably seen it 3 times. I'm sure if I see it again,
I've seen it twice.
I like it better each time I see it. Mm-hmm. I have a copy that needs to be watched of All the President's Men. I think I've only seen that once. I think I've only seen Misery once. I feel like if I saw those again, they would join this crowd of films that I like seeing more than once. But like I said, Maverick and Princess Bride, oh man, when it comes to hangout films, I mean, they're just...
And I love I love Princess Bride.
Yes.
Maybe I just have to watch this in the right presence. Once I get the DVD, I'll watch it. I bought mine with the double copy of Will Smith's Wild Wild.
Nice.
Similar movies indeed.
It's one of shows based on old shows. I've been pairing this show lately more by happenstance than design. I've been pairing the show with Columbo, and they actually make a great pairing. They really do. It's kind of fun. Well, come to think of it, though, we are overdue for a Columbo movie. But then again, how would you replace Peter Falk?
Or at least a Columbo reboot of a show.
Exactly.
But in any case, going back to moonlighting on Delusions of Grandeur, I do have a newest review up there of a movie from the UK, filmed in 2018, called Temptation. And so definitely check that out. And like we said, Dustin is up in the chair to show you exactly what kind of a person he is on this channel.
Scroll the name features, alligator.
And I say he's just been a real crocodile.
Yeah. Alligator supposedly is the pre-show. But then again, with Dustin, you don't know. I guess he wasn't extremely clear with me, but I will assume that what I got from him was yes.
So that should be an interesting discussion. Crawl is interesting. There's some really stupid people, but it was interesting. Considering that we just had our first tropical storm of the season, that's actually fairly timely.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
In any case, definitely, ladies and gentlemen, stay out of the West, at least for right now. I hear that there are a couple of unsavory characters still running around there, and have good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Good evening.